Hello and welcome to the Pinellas County Ready, Set, Protect Hurricane Preparedness webinar for mobile home community residents. My name is Jess McCracken. I'm the Whole Community Program Specialist for Pinellas County Emergency Management. Today, we encourage your participation and you are able to submit questions throughout the program using your Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. So anytime a question pops up, just go ahead and throw your question in there. We can try to incorporate it as we go through the topics, or we've set aside time at the end of the program to do a Q&A session to address the rest of those questions. There are over 250 mobile home and manufactured homes in Pinellas County, which accounts for close to 45,000 residential properties. And although communities, mobile home communities and manufactured communities are a great place to call home, they are not safe havens during a hurricane. Pinellas County residents in mobile homes, recreational vehicles, and manufactured homes must always evacuate no matter where in the county they are located. It is crucial that Pinellas County residents, especially those living in vulnerable communities, have a plan for hurricane season. This webinar will provide the information and resources needed for residents of mobile and manufactured communities to best prepare for hurricane season. So with that, I would like to introduce our expert panel. Today we have with us Suzanne Bouvier, the Emergency Management Coordinator for the City of Pinellas Park, Lou Renizeski with Pinellas County Emergency Management, Chief Javon Graham, the Division Chief of Emergency Management with the City of Clearwater, Amber Boulding, Emergency Management Manager for the City of St. Petersburg, Summer Marr, Public Education Officer and PIO for Largo Fire Rescue. So thank you all for joining us again. My name is Jess McCracken. I'm with Pinellas County Emergency Management, and I'll be helping moderate to walk us through today's presentation. Last hurricane season, Hurricane Ian became the third costliest weather disaster on record in the U.S. and the deadliest to strike the state of Florida since 1935. Many of us would say that Pinellas County was extremely fortunate to be spared the hardest hit from the storm. We learned with Hurricane Ian that time is the one resource you cannot get more of. This hurricane season, Pinellas County Emergency Management is asking residents to prepare by thinking about ready, set, protect. So during blue skies prior to hurricane season, up to the time where there's a risk that Pinellas County may be impacted, you still have time to get ready. As the storm moves closer and Pinellas County is forecast to have impacts, it is time to get set and your time will start to run out. As conditions become unsafe, you will need to shelter in place as it's not safe to move around during or immediately after a storm. Your time is run out and you need to be in your safe place to ride out the storm. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right in. Suzanne, as we are getting ready for the 2023 hurricane season, what do we want our mobile home park residents to know?
Hi, welcome everybody. The important thing that our mobile home park residents need to understand is that when an evacuation order is called, that means all mobile home park residents must evacuate, as you said earlier, no matter where they are in the county. We want you to have a plan for when an evacuation order is called. And that means knowing where you're going to evacuate, and stay safe during the storm. Storm surge, flooding, and wind, those are the major risk factors for all residents, but especially for those in mobile home and manufactured homes. And even if you live in an area not subjected to surge or flooding, you're still vulnerable to wind impacts. And those mobile homes, manufactured homes, and recreational vehicles are just not strong enough to withstand, the strong winds of a hurricane. Even the newer mobile homes built under tougher laws, they really cannot withstand those hurricane force winds, the gusts or the tornadoes. The things like carports, awnings, parts of the home like roofing and siding, those can become deadly missiles, and this makes the mobile home parks a really dangerous place to be during the storms.
Absolutely. So how will our mobile home park residents know when it's time to evacuate? How will they get these evacuation orders?
That's a good question. There's multiple ways they can get information. The first is the automatic emergency notifications. And if you haven't done so already, we encourage everybody to sign up for Alert Pinellas. It's a free service, and it allows you to receive emergency notices in several ways: by a phone call, a text message, or email. We also recommend that you have a NOAA weather radio, and that way you can get automatic alerts from the National Weather Service when the dangerous weather is in the area. And you can get specific weather alerts for Pinellas County using your radio. There's a SAME code, and that stands for Specific Area Message Encoding. And the same code for the county in Pinellas County is 0120103. I'm sure all this will be up on the website after this. And if your radio doesn't require the same code, then there's a frequency that you can turn to. Our local TV stations, our radio stations, those are great sources of information during emergencies. There's also digital billboards located on roadways, and then area businesses will post emergency information on their digital signs as well.
Great. And can you discuss other methods of getting important information?
Sure. Always, the county website, other websites. The county website is disaster.pinellas.gov. And that site contains the basic information that you're going to need to prepare, as well as, all the other emergency information and other topics. The mobile app, the Ready Pinellas mobile app, lets you personalize emergency plans. It has checklists, insurance information, home inventory, and a lot more. And you can just download it on your phone or other mobile device, so you have access to it even when your cell service is down. When there's an emergency, the app and the county website are going to provide up-to-the-minute information, including recommendations on what actions to take. Those emergency notifications will be sent to your phone as needed. There's also the County Information Center, the CIC as we call it. It opens up during emergencies to answer questions from the public. Those hours vary, so always check the website, the Ready Pinellas, and social media to see what the hours are. And in addition to that, there's a live chat feature. It's always available on Pinellas County website, pinellas.gov. It's available Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. But when there's an emergency, it typically opens around the same time as the County Information Center. And it might be a more convenient option for those who may be deaf or hard of hearing. And last but not least, let's not forget about social media. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Nextdoor, there's numerous sites out there. So we just want you to be sure you're getting the accurate information from trusted sources like Pinellas County government, the National Weather Service, the Hurricane Center, as well as your town or city social media sites. Those are the very best resources for up-to-date and accurate information. And you can get all these sites. I believe we're going to have those later in this program.
Great. Thank you so much. Absolutely. And we will be sending out a full resource guide with all of the links and information that we're going through today. So really just sit back and take it all in. I know it's like drinking from a fire hose. I've heard someone say it's a lot of information coming at you. So just sit back and kind of absorb that. And we'll be sending out all the links and resources for you so you can access that information directly. So we would like to get some information about you as our audience. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll here. And the poll asks, I plan to register for Alert Pinellas. True, false, or I am already registered for Alert Pinellas. You will not be judged for these responses. We're really just trying to get a gauge of where our audience is at and how we can better provide these educational resources and tools to help you prepare for hurricane season. So feel free to answer honestly. It really does help us in our planning. Okay, great. So it looks like, I'm going to share these results with you. It looks like a good portion of you are already registered for Alert Pinellas. And for those that aren't, we will definitely be sharing the information so you can get yourself registered before hurricane season this year. And one more poll. I plan to download the Ready Pinellas app on my phone. And the responses are true, false, or I already have Ready Pinellas downloaded on my phone. You are just trying to impress me here. It looks like we have a good portion already having access to Ready Pinellas. And if they don't, you are planning to download it. So all good things. Thank you so much for sharing that information with us. So we're going to move on and talk a little bit about evacuations, and the evacuation numbers for Hurricane Ian were very concerning. I'm going to bring on Amber from St. Petersburg.
All right. Good afternoon. Thank you. So really just to set the stage and why we, do these public education events and, really want, our residents to understand the risk and be prepared. It's to make sure that, our residents are safe and that we have homes to come back to and we can be resilient. So if we take a look at Hurricane Ian, as Jess said, by the numbers, it can be concerning. So in Pinellas County, we had just under 5,000 general population residents in our shelters. That's the county provided shelters during Hurricane Ian. The last time those shelters were open was in 2017 with Hurricane Irma, where we had over 21,000. So you can see the big difference in numbers there, a 77% decrease in those sheltering numbers, which could be interpreted to mean that either folks did not evacuate, they decided to stay home even though they were ordered to evacuate, or maybe they evacuated somewhere else other than a shelter. But regardless, that's part of the significance of why we want to get out and we want to educate folks and help you understand what your risk is. And just as another point of clarification there on the bottom of the screen, the evacuation was ordered through a level C, which is 440,000 people in 88 residential healthcare facilities. So that's a lot of people with only, like I said, under 5,000 that actually seek shelter.
And Amber, why is it so important that folks evacuate?
So we're going to talk about risk, and there's the risk that comes directly from hurricanes or storms, which we'll talk about, storm surge, winds, and flood. And then there's everyone's personal risk. How vulnerable are you if you were to lose power for, several days, or, do you have children? Do you have pets? And a lot of these things are points that we may not touch on today. I could preach, I think, for all day on the different risks and how those different risks inform your preparedness plan. But for today, we're going to talk about the storm surge, winds, and flood, which are the direct risks that come from hurricanes and why it's important to evacuate, not only if you are in an evacuation zone, but really specifically for this group. If you live in a mobile home, you're in a much more unique situation as a mobile home resident, and how your risk has increased now. Storm surge is, if you read, storm surge is the #1 killer of, hurricanes. It's that wall of water that comes in when you think of, hurricanes, the strong winds. It pushes the winds out from the Gulf or the ocean, and it pushes it up in. And really, in our case, into the Tampa Bay. And that's what causes that big storm surge and that big flood of water. So every resident in the county has a storm surge evacuation zone, and that's what we evacuate based on. However, as a mobile home resident, you're not just vulnerable to storm surge, you're quite vulnerable to winds. So any high wind situation that's associated with a hurricane is going to put you in very high danger. So as a mobile home resident, you may not live in an evacuation zone, but you are mandatory evacuation zone as a mobile home resident. So if the county orders a evac level A, and you think you're in an evac level C, as a mobile home resident, you're always evac, only because of that threat with the high winds. And then, of course, there's flood. So you might think storm surge, flood, aren't those the same thing? They are both water risks, but they're very different causes. So storm surge is that saltwater inundation that comes in from the storm. And then you can think of flooding as more of that freshwater threat. Again, if we think back towards Ian, if you watch the news, we saw huge flooding more towards Central Florida. And that's because that storm dumped 20+ inches of rain on certain spots. And regardless of how high you think your house is or how far inland, we're all affected by flooding. So taking those three things into consideration when we're looking at our preparedness plan is really, really important. And again, as a mobile home resident, if we're in a hurricane and there's a mandatory evacuation going on, you are always in that evacuation zone. So, we say a picture is worth 1,000 words. And these are pictures taken by Jess McCracken and some of our team that actually went down to Charlotte County after Hurricane Ian. And I'll tell you, driving around in Charlotte County. So through, Punta Gorda and those areas, they really didn't see a big surge issue. If those more inland and those that were south of the storm, like Fort Myers, had more of that storm surge. So the folks in Charlotte County may have thought, well, we didn't have storm surge, we're fine. Well, it wasn't the case. It was a very big wind event. So these are pictures of mobile home parks that we drove through. And really, there was nothing that was untouched. And some of these are newer homes with the newer straps. And really, with a mobile home, there's just no way to fully mitigate the effects of a wind, a high speed hurricane wind event. So these are just some of those pictures. And, in some of these parks, I mean, it looks like there was an explosion, depending on, how old or new that those structures were to begin with. But I think this slide alone shows the importance of evacuation for mobile home residents during a storm. And it just shows how serious it is when an evacuation is ordered, to please take it serious. And as we go through these, ready, set, protect, this is why. So when we get down to that set and protect, you need to be somewhere else that's going to protect you from the storm. And then our next slide shows storm surge. So when we talk about storm surge, it's not just a slow rise of water. It's a wall of water that can move in quite quickly, that comes in from, in our case, from the Gulf, and it takes debris with it, and it's got waves on top of it. So we have a video here that's going to show you some streets, and I believe Fort Myers, and how quickly that water comes in and affects the streets and the homes around it. And you'll see it starts coming in from multiple directions. So when we say shelter in place, the time for evacuation is over. This is why, because if you're caught on the streets in this, it's not going to be a good situation. And of course, that's a time lapse. But if you're caught in the middle of a storm surge area, again, it's very hard to evacuate at that point. So it's paramount that you understand what your risks are right now, and you make that plan for what you're going to do, so that when we get into that protect mode, the set and protect, you already have it mapped out on what you and your family is going to do.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Amber. And like you said, I think a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I know we always hear storm surge and high winds, but when you really see the effects of it, especially up close and personal, it really changes your mindset about how the effects can really ravage and come through your communities. So I'm going to launch another poll. And this poll is for information about Hurricane Ian. Again, no judgment. We are just trying to get some data about our communities. During Hurricane Ian, I evacuated to a host home, a family or friend, a hotel, motel, Airbnb, a public shelter, out of the area, or I did not evacuate. And it looks like we're pretty even across the board. So I will share the results that have come in. So it looks like we had a little bit of both, or a little bit of all of them, except I don't see any evacuations to public shelters. So we're going to get into that a little bit more and provide some information to you. We always say that shelters are the choice of last resort when evacuating. So we are in hopes that you have been listening to our previous webinars and really reach out and try to find somebody that can help you get to a safe place during an evacuation. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and reshare my screen. Now that we know why it's important to evacuate, and we know how to access the information and opt into those emergency notifications to receive information the way that makes the most sense to us, we need to talk about what we take when we evacuate. So, Miss Summer, can you walk us through the hurricane kits, emergency kits, and talk about some of the supplies that we would need during an evacuation.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So the supplies that you're going to be bringing when evacuating, or if you're sheltering in place, it really depends on where you're going to be. So we'll talk about a couple of those different places that you could evacuate to and what type of supplies to bring. But first, I'm going to start with just a blanket statement of specific supplies, basic supplies that you would need for any place you may be evacuating to. This is a lot of information, so just remember your supply kit list can be found in your hurricane guide. You can also find it online at disaster.pinellas.gov. And if you download the Ready Pinellas app, they also have some handy supply kit lists there for you as well. So we'll start with the basic supplies. You want to think for, sanitation items. Baby wipes actually become very popular during a hurricane, and they are very useful for hygiene, antibacterial, hand sanitizer, items like that, any type of hygiene supplies. When you're thinking of food and water, you want to have water, at least a 7-day supply, 1 gallon per person per day, and then also water for hygiene and cooking for up to 1 week. You keep in mind, if you are going to a shelter, they will provide food and water. But if you're sheltering in place at your home or going to a host home, you'll want to have enough water, and for food, up to 1 week supply of non-perishable foods that doesn't require cooking. And with that, you want to think about having a non-electric or manual can opener to help you open any of those non-perishable canned foods. You also want to have your medications and copies of your prescriptions. If the governor declares a state of emergency for a storm that is approaching, you can go back to your pharmacist and request a 30-day supply or up to 2 weeks for your medications, even if you've already gotten that prescription filled. So we want to make sure that you do have a good supply of medications that you need during an emergency. So make sure you stock up on those, especially if they declared that state of emergency. You can get those when you need it. Have a rain poncho, flashlight, or lantern. We don't want you to use candles, just from a fire safety side. We have seen a few fires involved from homes that have used candles during the storm. So just keep to those battery operated lanterns or flashlights. And then you want to have extra batteries for your flashlights and your lanterns. First aid supplies, bug repellent, bug spray is going to be helpful, especially even after the storm. You might be spending a lot more time outside because the outdoors might be a little bit cooler than even the inside of your home if we have power outages. So that's something to keep in your kit. You want to have your medical devices, extra batteries for your hearing aids, your contacts, glasses, and any type of medical devices or medical equipment that you need. Make sure you have that stocked. Cash, preferably in small bills, especially if you're going to a shelter. You want to have smaller denominations of your cash. Consider a generator. If you are, sheltering in place or going to a host home, think about having a generator for after the storm. But there is also some generator safety tips that will need to go along with that. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. Having a full tank of gas in your vehicle. If you do purchase extra gas, make sure you have them stored in a proper container and away from any heat sources. You want to have a cell phone with a battery backup charger, one of those that you can just plug it right in. You also want to have your information, like your contacts, have that written down on pen and paper. Sometimes you might not be able to remember, an important contact if your phone is dead. So having your family's phone numbers readily available will be a good resource to have. And sunscreen, thinking about after the storm, if you're outside, sunscreen will be helpful. So those are some of your basic supplies. If you're going to a shelter, if it's a public shelter, special needs, Lou will talk about that later in regards to supplies. But when you go to a shelter, you want to have a place to sleep. So you're going to want to bring either a sleeping bag or a folding chair or a twin size mattress. Don't bring your whole recliner or try to bring your whole couch. In the past, there have been residents that have tried to bring larger items for sleeping, but just remember you don't have a lot of space, and you want to think of the shelter as more of a life raft and not a cruise ship. So think your basic supplies. So, blankets, pillows, cot, folding chair, twin size mattress, a change of clothes for several days. There will be food and water provided, but you want to think about special dietary items that you might need. If you have gluten intolerance or anything like that, bring your own food for those needs. Again, flashlights, earplugs, eye masks for sleeping. It could get uncomfortable in the shelter. It might be loud. So bring some items that will help you to sleep better. A battery powered fan, and having a weather radio is also great no matter where you're going, sheltering in place or evacuating to a shelter. If you have young children or babies, you want to have supplies for them as well. So things, diapers, wipes, any of the needs that your baby will need. Your formula, pacifiers, any comfort items, and some entertainment items as well. Some toys, or if they have, tablets they can go on, or books, entertainment for them as they might be sheltered in place for a while. Again, we will talk about special needs items later. And we'll talk a little bit about if you have pets and service animals, you are going to need supplies for your pets as well. You want to have pet food and water for up to 2 weeks. Identifications for your pets, any collars with their names and information on that, the county licenses, immunization records, a photo of your pet will be helpful, and medications, toys, blankets, any type of items that you might need for your pets, bring those along as well. If you're going to a host home or a hotel, you want to think, if you're going to be packing for one of those places for a long period of time, any special bedding or blankets that you need, food also. Your hotel is going to be providing you food and water, so act as if you need enough non-perishable food and water for your stay there as you're evacuating. Paper plates and cups and utensils, and change of clothes for several days. We'll talk a little bit about important documents that you might need. You want to have your driver's license or an ID card. If you live on the barrier islands and you need an emergency access permit, you want to have that. Again, we talked about your important numbers that you would need, emergency contacts. It's good to have one family liaison out of state to be able to communicate with them your needs. Your medical records, insurance policies for your home, flood insurance, titles to your house and car, have those documents secure. Also take photos of your home before you leave. Photos before the hurricane hits that will help severely when it comes to insurance purposes, taking photos of all the items in your home. Any other type of, pay stubs for disaster assistance eligibility and items like that. Again, all of this can be found in your hurricane guide. And one other document I wanted to mention when it comes to like your medical records or your prescriptions or items like that, Pinellas County does have a yellow dot program where it's first responders can get your medical information if they need to when they respond to a call. If you have that program, you can request it through the county and you can take that kit with you or a vial of life. It'll have your medical information on there as well. So that's a lot of info for supplies, but that's just kind of an overview.
Great. Thank you so much, Summer. And again, we're going to be sending out resource guides for you with checklists, and you can always get your hurricane preparedness guide. And the new ones will be coming out prior to hurricane season, but the current hurricane guides have this on page 10. It's my favorite page of the guide, and it's got a checklist of all of the important supplies you'll need depending on where you're planning to evacuate. So that takes us through the big pieces of getting ready. So now let's say Pinellas County's forecast to have impacts and it's time to get set. So the threat is real and it's time to get set. Summer, what can mobile home park residents do to prepare their homes before evacuating?
Sure. So you want to think about the ABCs of home preparation. So that is anchor, brace, cover, and strap. And we will go through each of these portions of the ABCs in a little bit more detail. When it comes to anchor, that is bringing anything from the yard that could become windborne. So any type of yard decor, your yard gnomes, your flamingos, your bird feeders, your planters, anything that could possibly fly at high speeds in the event of a storm and cause damage, you want to bring those items inside. If you have a grill, you want to think about proper storage of that grill, bringing grill indoors into a shed, but you want to think about fire safety too. So you don't want to have your propane stored inside. So if you can have that chained down or just secure your grill and chain that down as well, because even grills could go flying in a storm. You want to consider replacing the gravel and rock landscaping with possibly a fire treated or a bark instead of having that rock material, because those could even fly in the event of a storm. Again, any kind of windborne item that could cause severe damage. Thinking about your property when it comes to trees, bushes, and foliage, have those properly trimmed and anchor down any trees that you think might be a threat to fall. So have all of those items around your house nicely trimmed. And you want to think about, having an inspection to your home to see how secure your foundation is, having anchors and bolts and connections, and just definitely do your research when it comes to, what type of contractor you're going to have. Make sure that they're certified and licensed and insured. So that's the anchor portion. And then we'll move on to the brace portion for your home. You want to have your doors bolted with the foot and the head bolts to ensure that you have proper, that your doors are properly braced. If you have a garage door, have those reinforced. I know manufactured homes don't necessarily have those, but those are one of the first things that go in a storm. And thinking about your carports at your homes, a lot of those tend to take off and have severe damage first in the storm. We've experienced that from storms in the past in manufactured home communities. You want to brace all the gable end walls with, your horizontal or diagonal braces. And, a lot of this stuff might sound overwhelming. Like, I'm not sure about how to do all of this. But again, if you do your research, there are several different companies and contractors that have, contracting companies that are involved with tie downs and anchors and weatherproofing specifically for manufactured homes. So if you do your research and have them come out and they can do, an estimate and just kind of see what kind of specific bracing and security you'll need storm-wise. So we'll move on to cover. You want to have all of your large windows covered, shuttered, your patio doors, make sure that they are securely fastened and approved with impact resistant shutters. Again, when it comes to shutters, there are lots of different companies that are specialists in hurricane shutters. So you can do some research on that if you're not planning to shutter up your windows yourself. You want to have those impact resistant shutters. Just again, make sure that they are a licensed insured company. And you want to just make sure any kind of opening that you have, your glass and your doors, all of those are covered. We don't want to have any water that could possibly come in. So you also want to have your weather strippings or any of your doors and windows, make sure that they're properly caulked so you don't have potential leaks as well. And then moving on to the last part for your ABCs will be to strap, tie downs, any freestanding fixtures in your yard, your carports. You want to just make sure that you have proper tie downs for your manufactured home. Again, a lot of these companies specialize in tie downs. So just some things to think about. Now is the time to prepare. A lot of this work can take time in getting a contractor out to do these types of projects. So the sooner you have your home secure, the more comfort that you can have, and knowing that you're best prepared if the storm does eventually come our way.
Great. Thank you so much, Summer. And I think you hit the nail on the head. When we're thinking about set, we're thinking about pulling the 2x4s or the wood that's been cut for your windows out of your shed to go ahead and put up, and then you're able to evacuate, knowing that your home is protected. You don't want to be waiting until the storm is coming towards us to go ahead and start thinking about these things. So during blue skies right now, outside of hurricane season, get these supplies ready so that you can get set when the storm is coming our way. Great, Summer. Thank you so much.
You bet.
So now we have our emergency kits packed and ready. We have our homes prepared, and the next step is to evacuate to our safe place. Amber, can we talk about what our options are for locations to evacuate to in Pinellas County?
Yes, thank you. So as Jess said and Summer talked about, we know our risk. We know what we're, we say, run from the water, hide from the wind. So we're going to do both of those things. So what are our evacuation options? fortunately, there are lots of options for you out there. So we're going to hit on each of these, and depending on your personal situation and your family situation, one of these may be more appropriate for you than the other. So the first one we're going to talk about is a friend or a family home. So, when we have a hurricane and an evacuation's ordered, you don't always have to automatically go to the shelter or automatically, leave town or leave the state. Which sometimes we see that. But just choose somewhere that's not in an evacuation zone or not being ordered to evacuate. So it could be a friend or family home. So if you have a friend, somebody you work with, a family member that is in an area of town that's not being ordered to evacuate and it's not a mobile home, maybe you can stay with them, to ride out the storm. So that's always, to me, the ideal option, because you're more comfortable. You're not with, strangers. You guys can pool your resources together, share supplies, and ride out the storm together. Sometimes a friend or a family home might not be available to you, and so you need to find somewhere else. So hotel, motel, Airbnb. And again, everyone's situation is different on, what you're able to do. To share my own personal story, this is the option for my family. So as a first responder, emergency manager, I have to come to work during storms. So I can't stay home, and we live in an evacuation A. So my family also has to leave. So what am I going to do with my family when I have to come to work? So our option is the hotel. And I'll tell you, this is something that you have to route out now and do your research now, because if you start calling hotels, when we get in that 5-day cone or 3-day cone, they're going to be full. So have your hotel identified, know where you're going to go or where you would like to go. Check those policies. So if you book a hotel, what's the cancellation policy? So if there's a storm out there, you're going to have to evacuate your home. If it comes, if it's going to bring direct impacts to us, you can go ahead and book that hotel, but you can cancel it if we get lucky and that storm goes somewhere else. So having that, checked out and looked up, and if that's your plan, it can be a great plan. But again, make sure it's in a non-evac zone. If you have pets, make sure they accept pets. And then out of the area, we like to say evacuate tens of miles, not hundreds of miles. It depends on what your level of comfort is and what your situation is. But look at your lessons learned. If you've ever evacuated, whether it was for Ian, for Irma, a lot of folks left town, left the state. Think back through what your experience was like. And if you did evacuate, I can guarantee it probably wasn't a great experience for you. And that's because everybody tried to leave the state at the same time. So if you're leaving out of the area, make sure that you know what that plan is. Make sure you leave early. Make sure you have your tank full and have those routes checked and know where you're going to go. Otherwise, we say evacuate tens of miles. You just need to get to high ground and a sturdy, home. So friends or family, hotel, motel, Airbnb, or you can evacuate out of the area, out of the storm's path. Make sure you see where that storm's going. We see a lot of folks who will evacuate towards Orlando because it's in the middle of the state and they think it's the safest. But if the storm's heading that way, there's still a lot of risk in Orlando with high winds and potential flooding. And then, of course, if these three options aren't available to you, we also have shelter options. So these are the public shelters that Pinellas County coordinates. There's the general population shelters, which we have all over the county. They are located primarily in public schools. So we have to shut down schools to be able to open those shelters. And then we have special needs shelters, which is for those that have some sort of special need, but for the most part live independently in the community. Those are just shelters that have a little extra help there. And our friend Lou's going to talk about those. And then we have pet-friendly shelters. If you have a pet, where can you go to make sure you and your pet are safe? We never want to put you in a situation where you say, I'm not leaving home because I refuse to leave, my dogs or my cat. So there are options for you as well. So we like to say that these are a last resort. We talked about what it's like in a special or in a general population shelter. You're there with a bunch of folks that you probably don't know. It's loud, it's bright. If you're trying to get sleep, it's not super comfortable. You may have a cot, you may have an air mattress, or you may have the floor, to be quite honest. These shelters are truly meant to be a safe haven and keep you safe while the wind's blowing outside. So we say it's a lifeboat, not a cruise ship. Don't go expecting a good time and a party. It's not the hurricane party, it's your last resort. So 100% go here. If you don't have another option, don't choose to stay home because you don't have a friend that lives on high ground, or you can't afford a hotel room. You have public shelter options. But again, let's use those as a last resort, because they're not always fun. And we just like you to set your expectations for those when you go. And then I think we have a next slide. Here we go. And then public transportation. So if you don't have a way to get to a shelter, PSTA has a great evacuation program where the buses run routes to the shelters, and they are free. You can take your pets on there, but we ask you if you can put them in a small crate, that's ideal. If you can't, if you have large dogs, put them on one of those muzzle leash. But again, the key is to do all these things before the wind starts blowing, because once the winds start blowing, these services start coming offline. So it's really important for you to understand your risk and know what you're going to need ahead of time, because when we get down to that set and protect modes, those, they think green, yellow, red. Once we get into that yellow and the red, it's really time to have it dialed in. So it's too late to start the preparedness. So if you know you're going to need transportation and you are going to a public shelter, work through that right now. What are you going to need and how are you going to get there? And if you need to go to a special needs shelter, or you're going to need transportation assistance and you can't get to a PSTA bus, then you qualify for the special needs program that has a transportation component, and you can register for that. And Lou will tell us more about that special needs program.
Great. Thank you so much, Amber. And that was a great segue into our next section. Lou, can you talk a little bit about how to register for special needs and the transportation assistance program?
Okay, so pre-register for special needs shelter is done through our county website. You can access it by pinellas.gov/special needs /. And that information is obtained by accessing our special needs registry. And it's just asking for just some pertinent information like your demographics, your name, your address. And once you type in your address and your city or your municipality, it will automatically geocode that address to the appropriate fire district. And why that's important is that during an evacuation like we had during Ian, the fire districts will access those special needs residents that are registered in the database, and they will begin coordinating transportation. If for some reason someone does not have a computer or has some difficulty accessing it through our website, they can certainly call our office and ask for a special needs registration form to be mailed. You can fill it out, and then when it's completed, you can send it back to us, and we will make sure that it's entered in our special needs registry.
Great. And can we talk about some supplies that we would need to bring with us to a special needs shelter?
Sure. So the caregivers, if anyone that is a special needs registrant that has a caregiver that assists them with, just some basic needs. We have some folks that have a caregiver that would assist them with, getting around or standing, or just some assistance in, getting dressed, or just some of those daily tasks that someone would be needed to assist a special needs registrant. We encourage the caregiver to come with that individual to assist them while at the special needs shelter. And some of the equipment that would be mandatory for them to bring with them is some, required mandatory medical equipment. such as if the person is on oxygen or has any type of monitoring devices that require electricity. Just remember, as what was discussed earlier, if we have extended power outages and these devices are primarily dependent upon electricity, it will be challenging for those devices to operate without electricity. And in the special needs shelters, we'll have that backup power capability to operate that specific medical equipment. Anyone who has who needs assistance with either a wheelchair, a walker, a cane, we strongly encourage those folks to bring that with them to the shelters as well. Also, any type of special dietary foods. Just remember that meals will be served at the shelters, but unfortunately, special dietary needs will not be available, unfortunately. So any type of special dietary foods in order to get through several days would be also recommended, and obviously snacks in between meals. We encourage those to either have a cot or an air mattress or a pool type chair to rest in. We encourage those folks to bring those items with them. And just remember that there will be limited space at the shelters, so it's unlikely that any specific individuals will have a whole lot of room, but definitely enough for you to rest, get some sleep, and any type of bedding that would go with, that would normally come with you, like a blanket, pillow, sheet. Please bring that with you as well. Also, Summer spoke about medications. Make sure that any type of medications, prescribed medications, or even over-the-counter medications that you take on a daily basis, make sure that you have all of those medications with you. And as we discussed earlier, make sure that you start looking at some of those things now. If you're, running low on certain medications, don't wait until those medications are out before they are, refilled, especially if the refill option has run out and it requires the pharmacy to contact the physician to get a new prescription order. And as we know, sometimes that takes a few days for that to occur. And we ask that you bring at least a 7-day supply at minimum of those prescribed or over-the-counter medications.
Great. Thank you so much, Lou. All really important information. And again, we'll be sending this out with our resource guide. So we're going to walk through to the protect phase, where the impacts are actually here in Pinellas County. Now we are all at our safe place, and the conditions outside are no longer safe to be moving around, and we need to be sheltered in place. I'm going to switch this over here. The winds will continue to gain strength, and once they reach a certain point, we have to pull our first responders off the road. We need to keep our first responders safe, and some of their equipment is not able to be on the roads during high winds. So we want to make sure that you are in your safe place. So if you have a medical emergency, there is either somebody there to help you. For example, if you're in a special needs shelter or you're at a family member's house, you're not alone, because unfortunately we're not able to respond to emergencies once the winds hit a certain point. So it's time for everyone to shelter in place. Chief Graham, what should residents expect after the storm, and what are safety considerations when returning home?
Good afternoon. Yes, like you mentioned earlier, there is a point of time when our public safety will have to get off the road. 35 miles per hour, some of our apparatus and engines can't drive, and a lot of your public safety and a lot of your resources have to be taken off the road for safety's sake. So after the storm goes by, it's not necessarily as safe as for you as well. During that time, we have to clear the roads. So the roads are full of debris. There are damaged homes, damaged houses. There's standing water all over the place. So right after the storm, when the winds initially died down, it's still not the time to try and go back to your house. Okay, you have to avoid the down power lines, flooded areas, standing water. A lot of this stuff continues on for hours and hours, even after the winds die down. Don't enter your home with major damage or to the roof or to the walls. If your home looks like it has some damage, there's some leaning to it, it's probably not safe for you to go through. So this is the time when you need your public safety to come and kind of do a search and rescue, go through the areas, make sure it's actually safe for you to go back so we can evaluate the damage throughout the area. In a power outage, which most of the areas will have loss of power for days or even up to a month, you have to treat all your traffic lights as if they're alive and treat your streets as a four-way stop. One thing, you'll never know when the lights will come back on. And another thing is, for safety's sake, you need to make sure people just aren't barreling through intersections. So you need to make sure you stop and use every intersection as a four-way stop. Avoiding candles in your homes. We spoke of this earlier. One thing is that if you have candles, a lot of times people are tired, wind is blowing, you leave the area, your candles can catch your place on fire. Then not only do you have damage potentially from the storm, now you also lost all your home and your property, the rest of it, due to a fire. We spoke about generators, how you should never operate your generators inside. That's the carbon monoxide that can come inside the house from using your generators can be fatal to you. And again, it's smokeless and it's odorless, and you may not even know what it's doing to you until you pass out and it's too late. So those should be definitely far enough away from their house to allow good ventilation. And also there's a time when you might actually have no water, have a boil water notice. Because we don't have power, we have to assume that the water could be contaminated or your water system could be contaminated as well. And we need to make sure we take some of that stuff into consideration. So now if your power goes out, and most likely it can for, like you said, hours or days, or in some areas like with the Ians and even during Irma, we had people without power for weeks. You need to make sure you keep your refrigerator and freezer doors closed. They will keep your products and your food stuff cold for a temporary bit of time, up to 4 hours even. And then start cooking your food using outside grills because you don't have any power at this point. And it's recommended at this time you can become a good community with your friends and relatives, and you're sharing food with each other to kind of help protect and feed each other. Because at this point, hopefully the stores will have some, or the resources will come in. We spoke about having resources for at least a week, but at this point, you have to get rid of your perishable stuff and start using non-perishable food from this point on. The affected water supplies. Excuse me. Just got over bronchitis 2 weeks ago, so I apologize for the scratchy voice. If your water supply is affected, well, and you'll have to assume it's affected without any power or resources available, you need to make sure you boil your water. Now, if you have purchase supplies or have stuff stocked up, you should have bottled water. But if you do have to use the water that comes from the tap, you have to boil it, bring it to a boil, and then use an 1/8 teaspoon of bleach and let it stand for 30 minutes. This kind of helps sterilizes the water per gallon and allows it to be drinkable for you to use until your systems come back on. Now, you won't know this if you don't have any power, phone, cable, or cell service. So during this time, it's recommended you have your radios. Again, not having candles, but having your emergency radio that ties in the National Weather Service, and can also listen to your other local reports in the county when they're pushing out information that you may need to pay attention to. Another issue and problem we may come upon is the sewage outage. You have your water supply coming in, which also could affect your sewage. So at this point, as gross as it may sound, you may not be able to utilize your toilets. So flush your toilets, let the water out, and then you could have to use possibly a bucket or a trash bag or something of that nature, either over your facilities or in a 5-gallon bucket with a tight lid. And do not use your sewer at this point, because you can have it back into your home as opposed to going out until it's safe to do so. It is recommended not to use kitty litter in this case, because it does block up your systems once everything is restored. So we don't want to have that. You don't want to have that issue as well. So some safety tips to keep in mind, also avoiding the down power lines. As Duke Energy goes, or whoever your power company goes to clear the areas, these power outages are restored by grids. And so what happens is, where if you go over a down line, it may get restored and it hasn't been properly shut off or turned back on. So it becomes an electrocution hazard for you. Flooded areas or standing water. Just because you can see it doesn't mean you should go over it. A lot of times the streets have been washed out. the water's covering over a hole or a manhole. And at this point, if you go into there, you could become a casualty, and you could potentially drown from the standing water, not knowing what's exactly underneath you or around you and your surroundings. So another thing that we need to look up or think about is the environment. The animals that are actually displaced and affected by the storm. During Hurricane Katrina, for one, people were getting out of the floodwaters and climbing into trees. Well, what was happening to some of them, wasps and also ants were climbing into the trees as well. So the people survived the flooding waters of the storm surge, only to get bitten and then fall back into the water due to the animals. Down in Fort Myers, this became an issue as well with the snakes and the water moccasins and some of the wild animals. Because the waterways were contaminated by all the oils and fuels, these animals had to leave those areas and went into what they thought was safe, which was the damaged homes or the homes that were still there. And so these animals and insects can be a hazard for us as well, that you need to make sure you think about as you go back to your home and look for. Make sure when you do go back, again, there's no power, you can have damage, keeping your loved ones with you, your kids, your pets, not getting separated. And again, this also keeps them safe as well, because you can make sure they're not going to areas that could be potentially hazardous or dangerous. When you do go back to your home, make sure you photograph and get a full damage inventory or a full list and inventory of everything that was damaged, even to the point of taking pictures of the water line inside your property. And make sure you contact your insurance and file your insurance claim as soon as possible with these photos to help catalog the damage that came into your home. There is a resource for cataloging the damage with the county, and that is through PinellasCounty.gov. And that helps you. I'm sorry, that's the flood risk. It's through Pinellas County. I'm sure that link will be put on at the end, but it allows you to help track your damage and report your damage to the county as well, so they can see how the damage is throughout the area. And then one other thing is, when you do have wet contents, try to remove them as early as possible. Mold can develop within 24 to 48 hours. And so anything that's sitting in water can, within a very short time, become even hazardous to you at that point as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Chief. A lot of really great information and some things that maybe we wouldn't consider, really some boots on the ground experience information for us. So thank you so much.
Right.
I don't see any questions, which I hope means that we have really given you all the information that you feel you need to prepare for hurricane season. In addition to the resources available through Pinellas County Emergency Management and through Pinellas County at pinellas.gov, I encourage you to take advantage of the resources from your city partners using your city website, social media. There are even programs for mobile home communities where you can be eligible for free fire alarm installs. So you can check that out through the city websites. And again, I'll provide these links in that full resource guide. In addition, if you like this sort of presentation and you think that it might be something you want to bring to your community, you can reach out to your city partners or reach out to us here at Pinellas County Emergency Management and schedule a presentation for your individual community. And we encourage you to take advantage of that. The link to this video will be sent on that full resource guide. So you can even hold an event yourself, pull that link up and show it in your clubhouse, invite everybody. And that way you have all the resources there and you can do it on a time that works for you. And in addition to city resources, there are also some really great programs that are available for mobile home communities. The biggest one being the mobile home tie down program. Pinellas County Emergency Management does not run this program, but we are a liaison to the organization that does. I've provided the website here. This program has been extended another 10 years, and Florida receives $2.8 million of the $10 million. And in addition, $7 million for the backlog, because there is an extensive waiting list. So as I mentioned before at the beginning, we have a little over 250 mobile home parks. 80 of our parks have already been served through this program and 13 are pending. So It doesn't necessarily mean that we have a long way to go. There are eligibility requirements. These are for mobile homes that are 1999 and older. So encourage your managers to go to this website, register the park, fill out the application. If you don't have a manager and you're in a mobile home community that's independently owned, try to get in touch with that owner or reach out to the program contact, which will be included in the resource guide, and they'll be able to walk you through the steps. That could really be a game changer for your communities by having this program enacted. It's part of a grant where you can get tie downs to the mobile homes that are eligible in your park for free. So we would definitely like to see everyone take advantage of that. This is the first of 4 hurricane preparedness webinars that we will be doing. The next one comes up March 23rd, and that's going to be our general preparedness. And that will be presented in English and in Spanish. We also have a faith-based organization webinar and a business webinar. So if any of those pertain to you or you have friends that you think may benefit from that information, please feel free to share. Registration is required. There's individual registration links we'll send out. And also you can register at pinellas.gov/stay-informed. So again, we know that this is a lot of information. We really appreciate you taking the time to spend with us today, and we will see you soon. Stay safe out there.